My name is Kimberly Dutton, and I am interviewing Robert Blinn. It is 7708. Hello.
Hello.
Please tell me why you came to Ashland.
I came to Ashland as a result of the appointment of the United Methodist Bishop in Virginia to assume the pastoral responsibilities for Duncan Memorial United Methodist Church here on the campus of Randolph-Macon.
Where were you living before then?
At that time, we were living in Martinsville, Virginia, about 3.5 hours west and south of here.
What were your first reactions of Ashland?
Well, I had known about Ashland over the years as the place where Randolph-Macon College was located and as a small town within the general metropolitan area of Richmond, also as the town closest to King's Dominion. So my impressions had been good. I attended a small United Methodist college very similar to Randolph-Macon, Emory and Henry in Southwest Virginia, and my college was also Division III, and we played a lot of sports against Randolph-Macon. So I had an impression of the college as a pretty fierce competitor also over the years.
Did you ever know anybody that attended the college?
I've known many people, colleagues of mine in the ministry primarily, some older, some my age, and some younger, who have come through Randolph-Macon College.
What do you feel about Randolph-Macon College's involvement with the church?
Well, it is one of the 6 institutions of higher education that our annual conference supports. It's the oldest one, and of course the oldest one in the country, so we're really proud of Randolph-Macon. My impression since I've moved here has been that the strongest connection between the churches of Virginia and the college have probably been in the past. I know that our conference, our collection of churches, supports the college with a significant but relatively token gesture of financial support, in addition to providing some scholarships for United Methodist students that attend here. And so we have a connection that we're really proud of, and we mention the college every year at our annual meeting, and usually the president comes and greets us like Dr. Bob Lindgren did back in June of this year.
What neighborhood did you move in?
We moved into a residential neighborhood in the central part of Ashland, south of Thompson Street and a little bit west, 1 block west of the railroad tracks. It's the parsonage for this church.
Who do you think are Ashland's most colorful characters so far?
Well, the ones I know the best are the members of my congregation here. Tom and Carlene Bass are active in our church, and Tom has a long historic connection with the college, having been a graduate over 50 years ago, and Carlene having grown up here from a little girl onward. There are several other folks who have long-time roots here in Ashland, some with the connection with the college and some without. Jack Luck and Shira Luck, and then Jack's mother, who's one of our oldest members, 93 years old and still lives by herself, and reads every day and is quite active and alert and often comes to church. Let's see. Then some other folks that are not a part of our church that I've been really glad to get to know include Robert Burris, who's active at Union Baptist Church here in Ashland, and many members of his congregation, the community. The Southern Baptist congregation, Pastor Robert Thompson and his wife Kathy live here in Ashland and have become good friends of ours over the year that we moved here.
Have you seen any changes in the neighborhood since you've come?
No, since we've lived here a relatively short amount of time, the main changes that we've watched have been the weather, going from summer into fall and fall into winter and winter into spring and spring into summer. It's been really beautiful. We've really enjoyed the moderate temperatures here. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, it gets plenty of rain. We really appreciate the way the campus looks. A lot of work goes into keeping it looking tip-top shape, and since church is located right across the street, it's very pleasant to look at. I often ride my bike from the house to the church. It's less than a mile. We also appreciate the Brock Center. As the pastor, my wife and I are able to use the athletic facilities at the Brock Center. That's been very pleasant. I have noticed that there's some concern about whether the Amtrak stop will be moved to another railroad line here in the county. There seems to be a lot of effort on the part of the local citizenry to keep the Ashland station open. Another colorful character, and one that I've also seen some in the news here lately, is Sue and Richie Watson. Dr. Watson just recently retired from the college, and Sue has been a school board member for over 30 years in Hanover County. And I was really grateful to see so many folks come out in support of her ongoing appointment as a school board member in Hanover County. She received an honorary doctorate from the college this year and has been a longtime member of the church.
Have you taken part in any town events such as the Strawberry Fair?
I attended Strawberry Fair. The church, of course, right on the route, had several booths and activities related to it. I had really been looking forward to it since I'd never even heard of it or been to it before. It was an extremely hot day, and so people said the crowds were down, but still, it seemed like there were thousands of people right here on the main street. That was really, it was great to see, although it was almost unhealthfully hot that day. Another high point was the Randolph-Macon commencement and the baccalaureate service. I've come to really appreciate Daryl Hedrick, the chaplain for the college, and also Chris, the music director, the choir director. He does a great choral program. The commencement featured Tim Russert, and it's one of the last public appearances that he made before his untimely death. One of the first things we did here, which was a lot of fun, was the non-motorized parade on the 4th of July. We were out of town this year for the 4th, but it went ahead as scheduled, and everybody seemed to have a good time.
What kinds of events does the church hold or has held over the year?
Well, we reach out to college students in a variety of ways. We have a college Bible study class that meets on Wednesday afternoons. We offer exam time, home-cooked meals, sit around and talk. Very relaxed thing during exam weeks. We have a full-time music director, William Gordon, here at our church, and he not only directs the variety of choirs and handbell choirs and the other staff that work with our children and youth choirs, but he also is a director in his free time of the Central Virginia Masterworks Chorale, which brings a lot of community people together who love classical choral music, and that's been great to see the kind of music that, and just the cultural offering that brings to the whole community. Yeah, there are some other things. The church has mission trips that it organizes. We're sending a group of youth to the Oklahoma Indian country to work on houses and other projects there through the church. We're also sending another group to inner city District of Columbia later this summer to also do ministry with some children up there.
What do you feel about college student involvement in your church?
Well, we really appreciate it, and over the years we've had several. One of the programs that the college sponsors is the Bailey Scholars, and these are persons who've declared an interest in some kind of Christian ministry as a career, and so we see several of the Bailey Scholars that come and participate in some of our programs. And then there are between 10 and 20 students that attend one or other of our worship services on Sunday morning. There are several faculty and retired faculty that attend the church, and some staff who are not faculty but part of the college staff, also a part of the congregation. Mr. Luck that I mentioned earlier is a trustee. We have some emeritus trustees, also part of our congregation. So it's not as much as I would like to see. I don't know if you're really interested in hearing more about that, but this seems to be like a perfect opportunity for the college, with its emphasis on academic learning and especially science, the sciences, to be a resource to the church, which represents the religious side of culture. And on the other hand, for the church, with its emphasis on religious teaching, to be a resource to the college, not just the students, but the faculty and staff as well. That there are a lot of interesting efforts to bridge that divide in our current culture right now between the scientific world and the religious world.
What kind of efforts?
Well, for example, there are brain researchers, neuroscientists, that are trying to understand what we mean by mind and personality, and finding how much of our understanding of ourself is shaped by our social contacts, obviously our parents and other family members, and then friends and acquaintances. That human contact is very much a part of what we mean by religious community. That you can be spiritual or you can be religious in a certain way by yourself, but even that is something that you learned or came to appreciate through your contact with other people. And even if you like to practice that on your own or with your own family, it's still important to nourish that from time to time with a larger group of people. So from the side of religion, which looks to supernatural sources, so to speak, for truth and for understanding or making sense of experience, we see scholars and scientists and researchers in the scientific world also trying to understand the importance of, in this case, social interaction, human community. In other words, the struggle to understand what is reality and what is the nature of truth in general, not just religious truth, but even scientific truth, is in part determined by the observer, and how the observer has been shaped by his or her culture or society. And it's impossible to really get an objective standing point to observe anything. You're influencing it as the observer. And so we think, well, in the religious world also, we don't claim to interact with an impersonal, machine-like source of ultimate truth, but rather something or someone that has personal qualities, and those very qualities make this source of divine truth similarly interactive. So that when we interact with God, God's heart is affected, and we use religious language to talk about that. And the same way, when God interacts with us, God is blessed, or God is somehow involved with us in a personal way. What I'm finding in my own reading is that what we've inherited in a certain religious tradition, we have certain emphases in the Methodist tradition, but we don't claim any special categories of truth for that. It's just what we've experienced and the language we have come to use in the Methodist tradition are ways to understand experience. And what the scientific community does is constantly test a variety of hypotheses and listen to what other scientific communities in other parts of the world have done with their hypotheses, and to struggle to bridge the differences in language and do the right translations, and then to come up with some provisional truth, and whether it's medical or practical in terms of technology, to make that as widely translatable and as beneficial as possible to the largest number of people. That's pretty much what religion is trying to do too. Different religious traditions, we say, hey, here's what we've discovered in our experience, and we'd like to see if it wouldn't translate to your experience, and see if it would be a benefit to you. So, I mean, we see these similar efforts, then why not say, okay, there isn't any division anymore between the spiritual world and the material world. That the material world is full of things we don't understand, and that we could identify as being somewhat spiritual in terms of like social contact or social context, and then the religious world has things that we say are absolute truth as though we've tested it scientifically. Well, we haven't really tested it scientifically, but we do have this body of tradition that's tested it over and over again, and it keeps coming up true in how we live our lives. So it seems like there's a lot of room for conversation there. And so a church on a college campus is an ideal place for that.
Are you thinking about creating any programs to address that?
Well, now that I've finished 1 year here and basically gotten to know the congregation and found my way around the college, I'm just now finding out, like, that's the library, okay, and that's the president's office. And now I feel like I know my way around a little bit more. What I'd like to do this year, my personal goal, is to get to know more faculty members and to establish at least a personal connection, like, hey, I know you. One I recently met is George Spagna, who happens to be on the town council in Ashland. So he's a very community-minded person. I know he's also active in his local church and several church and social organizations like the Ashland Free Clinic. I'd love to meet other people like that not part of my church, because our paths wouldn't cross, but because they're part of the college, it would be fun to get to know them and find out what they're doing and what they're talking about.
What do you think is most important to people in your community?
Well, it's probably not much different than it is in any community. The things people identify to me as most important include security of property and of life, an economy, and people can work, basic things like clean water, clean air, good schools, public schools, and access to private schools if that's what people choose. So these things are the common good, would be pretty obvious things, but then the freedom to worship or not to worship, but to understand that there isn't going to be any compulsion one way or the other about that. I think that's really important to people.
What are major gathering places that you've been to in Ashland?
Well, I've been to meetings at the library. I've been to meetings at the town offices, the town hall. I've been to several large meetings on campus. Our clergy association, the Ashland Clergy Association, sponsors an annual Thanksgiving observance. That's the week of Thanksgiving in one of the town churches. We also sponsor an annual Easter sunrise service, and that's usually been held on the plaza out in front of the Brown Student Center at sunrise on Easter Sunday. One of the newer things we did this year that I'd participated in a previous community where I'd lived is a Good Friday noontime walk around Ashland. So about 50 of us from different churches had readings and sang songs and carried across to 7 different locations right around the downtown part of Ashland. It was a beautiful day, and people seemed to really find that meaningful. So maybe we started a tradition here. We'll see. Then you'll see a lot of people in the stores around town, some of the same people in town, and whether it's U-Crops or Food Lion or Walmart, Ashland Tea and Coffee. Some great restaurants right here in Ashland, Homemades by Suzanne's, Iron Horse, the Club Car ice cream place. It's a very user-friendly town.
Are there any other activities between the different churches?
Well, the Clergy Association, the pastors of the various churches, meet on the first Wednesday of the month for a breakfast meeting at Ashland Coffee and Tea. Our church is working with Robert Burris's church and some other community groups like the fire department and the YWCA to sponsor a children's educational experience. It meets in our church from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. for 3 weeks. This is the third and final week of that. And we've had 13 or 14 kids from the community. So we're sponsoring it at our church as far as the location, but we've tried to make that a community event as much as we can. And this is the first year we've done it, although our church has been involved with things like that over the years. But I was really glad to see that get revived this year. As far as what the other churches in the community sponsor, I've heard of things like a summer picnic, at least for the clergy and their families, but I don't think that's been scheduled yet. We may just be focusing on our Thanksgiving service in the fall. Another major cooperative effort of the area churches is called Ashland Christian Emergency Services, or ACES for short. Right now, the chairperson of the board of ACES is Al Dickerson. He's a member of our church. And Al coordinates a group of about 25 volunteers that every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday meets at a building that the organization owns on Caroline Street, right along Route 1. And they have a clothes closet with a lot of clothes that come in by donation and go back out, a food pantry that provides about a week's worth of food for a large number of clients. They also process donated furniture. They do a big winter coat drive in the winter. They have children, infant formula and baby food. They also, on a very limited basis, can provide emergency shelter funds for electricity, or in some cases rent or one night's lodging in an emergency in a local hotel. We work closely with the police department because ACES is not open 24 hours a day. The police department will try and help someone who needs emergency shelter, and the ACES will come through and pay for it. It relies totally on donations. There's no state or community or city or town funds that goes to support that.
How long has ACES been here?
I think this is in its 35th or so year. It's been here for quite a number of years. It originally started in one of the buildings here on Main Street, and then it went to what's now the train station before it was renovated as a train station, until it finally purchased its building with community donations over on Caroline Street.
Could you tell me some about your major church organizations, like women's clubs, men's clubs?
Sure. The United Methodist Church here was founded in 1853, and so over the years, its organizations have been called by different names. Currently, we have what we call United Methodist Youth, which is for students in 6th grade through 12th grade, and they have weekly programs. They're the ones who are sponsoring these mission trips this summer, and they do worship activities and Bible study and fellowship things and service projects throughout the year. The United Methodist Women have monthly meetings. They're divided into subgroups we call circles, and they also meet on a monthly basis during the school year, and they raise a lot of money for missions locally and around the world also. We have United Methodist Men's Group, which meets monthly for breakfast on Saturday morning. Their major project for the last several years has been Habitat for Humanity, and they've donated money for the building of several Habitat houses here in Ashland, and then they organize work days and they go and work on them. Our missions team at the church plans and organizes mission trips, sometimes in support of ACES. There's also a ministry in Petersburg, which is considered an inner city ministry. There are United Methodists who work there full time, and we partner with them, and we go down there for work projects and things like that. The mission team also has sponsored in the past trips to Hurricane Katrina affected areas of Mississippi and Louisiana.
Are college students also involved with Habitat for Humanity?
They are. I noticed that several of the fraternities and sororities do Habitat for Humanity fundraisers. There are several organizations on campus that I've just heard about. There's a Making a Difference Day. I think some of those folks went for a Habitat site project, in addition to dozens of other projects around town. And then there's Brothers
For change?
Brothers for Change. Okay. I can't quite recall if they've done a Habitat project, but they're the kind of organization that wouldn't surprise me if they did.
Do you have any memories that stick out to mind about your experiences here in the church?
Well, as far as the church and the community, I remember being in college and coming with the cheerleading squad and standing on the visiting team side of the football field. And it was funny when we moved here, and nothing really looked familiar around campus. But as soon as we drove up Henry Street and went by the football field, then suddenly that all came back to me. The college hosted us and the church on our annual bicycle ride to raise funds for missions for annual conference. We started in Charlottesville in the middle part of June, and then ride to Hampton, and the conference was there. And this is where we spent the night. So that was an impression of both the church and the community that wanted to support us. They fed us supper, and they put us up overnight, and then they fed us breakfast, and got to use the dorms and the washing machines and everything like that. It's just really great. And that was before I had any idea that I would be living here and serving as this church. Then the church is also relatively centrally located for the whole state, and there are organizations that will have continuing education projects, like studying the writings and teachings of John Wesley, who organized the Methodist movement. That society will have an annual event, and sometimes it's here, and I've been to those over the years. So those are some of my first impressions of the college. And then some of our leading pastors and some of the pastors who've been who have a reputation for helping Christians really think about what it means to be a Christian, and in some ways, I guess you could say more on the liberal side of things rather than. But those labels are not all that useful, because you'll have some people who don't think very clearly, both liberals and conservatives. But it's just really an honor for me to be the pastor here and see the pictures on the walls of some of the people who've been the pastors here before, and they've been some of our leading thinkers and promoters of a progressive kind of Christianity that unites faith, thought of as an intellectual or a mental belief system, with action and service in the community.
Did you hear any interesting stories about the other pastors that were here?
Well, one of the Sunday school classes is named for Jim Boyce, who was the pastor here, and he really believed in Christian education for adults. And so he gathered together a group of interested adults and said, you need to keep studying. You're not a child or a youth anymore, but you still need to keep studying. And so he helped them get their Sunday school class organized. So they named it after him, the Boyce class. There's a whole bunch of adults that felt like Vacation Bible School should not only be for children and youth, but that the adults need a Vacation Bible School. And part of that's because this is an academic community. The church is located on campus, and summertime is different from the academic year. There's fewer students, more relaxed schedule, and so some of the school teachers and some of the college professors and the faculty and the staff members, they have a more relaxed schedule, so it's a vacation for us. So let's have Vacation Bible School. So for several years, Dr. Ira Andrews, who's a member of our church and retired professor, has conducted adult Bible school. And last year we had a fundraiser for the Nothing But Nets campaign, which raised money to buy mosquito bed netting for parts of the world where malaria is a serious problem. So the Children's Bible School, through several contests and challenges, raised about $800. And then they brought a delegation of children to the Education Planning Committee meeting. So we challenged the Vacation Bible School for adults to match that, and so they did. So they're doing that again this year, and again we hope to raise about $1,500. This year it's all going to Habitat for Humanity.
What do you feel about the religious studies at the college?
Well, it has a great reputation. Dr. Andrews, I just mentioned, retired professor of New Testament. He's well known throughout the annual conference for his leadership. Dr. Steve Toole was a member of our church and the faculty until he took another teaching position somewhere else a few years ago. He also was widely respected. Willie Chappell, longtime professor of religion at the college, now retired, been retired for several years. And I mentioned Darrell Hedrick. He teaches several religion classes. I appreciate the fact that the Council for Religious Affairs, I'm not sure if I got their name right, it meets once a month, and representatives of several different denominations that have campus ministries are supported through the college in that monthly meeting. And they plan mission trips and seminars, and they do various service projects around the campus community. I haven't had a chance to actually sit down and go to a class or to meet all the professors that are currently teaching in the religion department. One interesting thing that Chaplain Hedrick told me was that incoming students are all invited to fill out an information card, which gives, contact information, name, address, and so forth. And it also has a box for religious preference, and it has some of the larger denominations, and then it also has a box for other, and it has a box for unaffiliated, so incoming students can check. And he said the box that has the most number of checks in it is unaffiliated. He's not sure if that means that that the students are actually have no religious background or denominational affiliation, but they would just rather check that rather than put themselves in a certain community right off the bat. So he explores that in his own way through his ministry on campus and his work with the other religion departments. And I really don't know what all that involves, or how our church could be more involved with that. We'd like to see more students involved. It's a little disappointing that with maybe 1,400 students right across the street. I mean, what church wouldn't love to have 1,400 18 to 22-year-olds right across the street? But whether it's because our sanctuary is a sanctuary, or because most of the people who attend here are not college people, but they're town people. We have a variety of ages, lots of children and youth, and we have lots of adults, in their 50s, 60s, and then up. And so maybe it's not real college friendly. But then religious attendance at religious services used to be required at Randolph-Macon, and not that long ago. And I'm not saying it should be, but since there is no encouragement on the part of the college to be involved in religious activities, and I'm not sure that the college wants to do or should do it. I wouldn't want to have a lot of students coming here only because they had to,
Right.
or because they got credit for it. But on the other hand, there are events that we sponsor that attract a large number of students. And when we feed them, when we have a speaker on a certain topic, like we had a state senator came and talked about transportation issues. And I think some students got credit for attending that, but then others just came because they're interested. We're having a speaker on the environment come in the fall, and we hope to get a lot of people from the church and from the college to come and listen to him. We call that ministry Hot Topics, and we'd like to see more students come. I think again there's that numbers thing. When we have potentially, we could have hundreds of students, and we only have 50. Some people in the church think, well, we haven't been very successful. But I think 50, well, on Sunday morning we might have 12 or 15. So 50 is a great turnout. It's just a difference of perspective.
What do you think about the church structurally?
Well, this church is really interested in streamlining its structure and organizing itself for the areas of ministry to care for the congregation and all of its ministries, and what it does to reach out to the community, both in ministries of invitation and welcome and also service and mission. So I've been really pleased with the way the church here wants to be organized, and we've done some reorganizing, and people are really stepping up. Like any institution, the church is subject to inertia or to a tendency to do things the same way, and some of those things are good things, and some of them become habitual, and nobody really knows why we do them anymore. So they're questionable value, and then there's some people who will say, well, if we start changing this and changing that, then it means we're going to start changing the things that are really valuable. So we don't want to change the things that are really valuable, so we don't want to change anything. Other people realize that change over the decades is what has kept the church relevant, kept it alive. And so we as a congregation are trying to step through that minefield of balancing the need for creative and refreshing relevant change and holding on to the things that we never want to let go of. So that's where I find myself right now after a year here. I guess the honeymoon is over in some ways, and people are really looking to see what changes can be made, that should be made, and what changes that we'll avoid that potentially dangerous changes. So that's where we are right now.
Are there any interesting rooms in this church? Any rooms that are special?
Would you like to look around? Or there's the sanctuary. That's probably the most important room in the church. The office suite and the colonnade, which connects the office suite with the sanctuary, is one of the newest additions to the church, about 15 years ago. And then there's the fellowship hall, which was built the same time as the sanctuary, and over it are educational classroom spaces. So lots of classroom spaces in addition to the fellowship hall. When the colonnade was added, it enclosed what had been a U and made it into a courtyard, and that's used not only for the visual appeal of flowers and attractive landscaping, but it also is a place where cremated remains can be scattered. And then for those persons choosing to be remembered in this way, a bronze plaque is attached to the brick wall of the colonnade. And there are a dozen or so folks who've been memorialized that way, and could be many more. It's not really a place of burial for ashes, but just a place where they'll be scattered. If that's the primary location, then rather than a headstone or ground stone, the bronze plaque on the wall names the person.
That's very interesting.
So those are some of the more interesting places. We just recently replaced the 3-story high windows in our sanctuary, and it doesn't really change the appearance that much, but when you look closely at one of the old windows, you can see how badly in need of repair, and because the church building itself is about 60 years old. So there are several projects that the trustees are working on now to renovate and repair, and in fact upgrade. We're thinking about doing some major upgrading of our kitchen and restrooms, and maybe even adding a 3rd floor to our educational building and putting an elevator in. We don't have a lot of space around the church because we're right in the middle and surrounded by the campus. So vertical seems to be the only way we can actually increase the floor space.
Have you ever used Blackwell for any of your activities?
Yes, we have a very beneficial relationship with the college for the use of Blackwell Auditorium. Last March of 2007, after a period of study, the church sponsored a monthly series of contemporary worship services, and they were held in Blackwell Auditorium. Singing recently composed praise music, and having a more relaxed order of worship with the use of drama and projected words and images. That seemed to be successful. The associate pastor who organized that ministry was transferred to another church in Virginia Beach. So we lost his leadership, and the senior pastor moved that same year. So that's when I came. The contemporary band, the band that played the contemporary music, was invited to play at the 8:30 hour, and we tried that for a period of months, and we found that that was not a very convenient hour for a lot of people that we were trying to reach to come to worship then. Like college students, 8:30 on Sunday mornings. It's not a time when there are just a lot, masses of them out and about. And families with younger children, that was also kind of hard to make. So in March of 2008, we, after a lot of planning and working with the college, began a 9:30 worship service in Blackwell Auditorium. The college provides the space free of charge to the church. We haul in a fair amount of equipment and set it up, and the band plays a recently composed praise music, and we project the words on screens, and we have meaningful videos that fit with the theme for the day, and sometimes have drama. Get a lot of youth involvement in that. I've heard recently from one of the people that works with our college student Bible study class that there are some students that play music in a band, or could form a band, and they might join us in the musical leadership starting in September on maybe a bi-weekly basis or a monthly basis.
How does it feel to be in the center of the universe?
Yeah, it's a great image. I never got to know the former mayor Dick Gillis, but it's a thought-provoking concept that Ashland can claim to be somewhat central geographically to the state, to the state's rail lines, and the train and rail has been an important part of the development of the college and the town. It's the intersection of these two bicycle routes. One goes east-west and one goes north-south, and so it intersects here. That makes us central that way. But then philosophically, you think about the center of the universe is always where you are, and so to think about the way we develop our understanding of our place in the universe and of our role and of what our purpose here is, and that's what college students should be doing, besides making friends and experiencing freedom, and choosing classes and joining groups for service projects and for parties and things. They are also finding out what their purpose in life is, and they are at the center of their universe. So it's a great concept. It's interesting how the town has embraced that as a motto, and puts that on the flags around town. And as we look backwards at 150 years, it roughly corresponds to the history of the church. Also, 1853, just a few years before 1858, whatever that meant for the town. A few Methodist families had gotten together about the same time. We celebrated our 150th year in 2003, so we're really eager to help turn the page, look ahead at the next 150 years here in the town.
So what are you doing for the 150th celebration?
Well, I submitted kind of an account of our moving here, and how we've been welcomed on Duncan Street, and how we really appreciate the small town atmosphere of Ashland, and at the same time its reasonable proximity to Richmond, and to the cultural opportunities and the hospitals and the universities that Richmond offers. My wife is also a pastor, and while we live here in Ashland, she commutes to a church on the south side in Chesterfield County. It's about 25 miles away. It's not an unreasonable commute. She really enjoys coming back home and spending time off here in Ashland. So it's been it's been fun to both experience the town of Ashland and also Central Virginia and the Richmond metropolitan area.
Do you ride the train often?
Well, not often. We rode the train on vacation down to Charleston, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia, over the winter. Really enjoyed that. Very easy. It's very conducive to conversation. Ride the train. Several folks in our church and community, I have heard, will ride to New York City or even farther. And we have two children, and they both live in the Philadelphia area, so we have ridden the train up there and back. And it's very convenient.
Have your children seen Ashland yet?
Oh yes, they've both been to visit here. The last time they were here, or I guess it was our daughter and son-in-law, they had found in a health food store in Philadelphia whole grain cornmeal from the Ashland mill. And they asked up there, well, what Ashland is this? And they looked on the wrapper, everything's Ashland, Virginia. So they came and said, where's the Ashland mill? We found it, and they stocked up on all their favorite wheat and corn products. So that's been fun. And then also exploring some of the historical and cultural things around King's Dominion and the Scotchtown, home of Patrick Henry, these bicycle routes, and then just the combination of being a small town and access to the city of Richmond. It's been a lot of fun for them. They, of course, live in Philadelphia. They're familiar with urban life, and so it's not like come to Richmond to come to the big city, but it's nice to be able to come to Ashland and experience the rural Hanover County feel, but still not be far from Richmond.
Have you learned any interesting stories about the history of Ashland?
Well, yeah, the importance of the railroad, the town's involvement with the skirmishes of the Civil War nearby and right through Ashland, the movement of the college from its original location to Ashland in the 1870s, the history of the church and how it started in town and then it moved to the campus, and then the old chapel was the church's home for several decades, and then in the 50s the move across the street here to this location. That history is all well documented. The importance of Ashland as a commercial center, as a resort area for people who lived and worked in Richmond. Those have all been interesting features of Ashland, learning about it. Geologically or geographically, the fact that it sits on a wetland and that swampy areas are nearby in several places around Ashland. That's been very interesting to look at, and then sitting in on some of the master planning that the campus has been going through, and the procedures that they have to go with the federal government to actually build on a wetland, and should they, and how do we accommodate the natural environment. That's all very interesting. It seems to be a pleasant place to live, but then sometimes it rains a lot and the water stands pretty deep everywhere.
Did you see any interesting features in the master plan?
Probably the most important feature for us here at the church would be whether Henry Street continues as a street for automobiles, and whether you could be able to drive your car only as far as the church and then turn into the parking lot behind the church. I've seen various potential plans of the future that will increase the fine arts offerings if Blackwell Auditorium would be expanded, and the Copley Science Center might be able to be expanded in certain ways. Then the facilities to the north and west of the campus don't really affect us that much here at the church. And not really that much at the town, since it's currently undeveloped. There's baseball fields, and if it's developed into student housing, and that will spread things out a little bit. And Bob Lingren's been talking about his vision for the main street becoming more college friendly, inviting the kinds of businesses that would attract students to shop in or to visit. That's an interesting concept. I'm not sure how long range that would have to be. But when you look at other college towns like Charlottesville or Charlotte, or I mean, High Point, North Carolina, near where we've traveled, and there are sections of the town near the campus that you clearly are a college town, like places to visit and shop. And you don't really get that feeling when you drive down through the main street of Ashland. If you didn't see the signs for Randolph-Macon College, you'd have a hard time knowing that it was here. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Everything happens on campus like it would on any other college campus. During the school year, it's dizzying the number of activities that are constantly being offered at the library and at the Brock Center, at, the Student Center, all around campus. So it's a very active campus, and I know at 8 o'clock you drive up Henry Street, it just looks like people are all crisscrossing it back and forth as far as you can see. But then for the town itself, you don't really notice that many students. I don't think it's a good thing or bad thing. It's just the way it is here, and whether there's underlying tugs and pulls and desires, can't really tell from my perspective. It seems like the town is really glad to have the college here, and the colleges are glad to be located in a relatively quiet, small town.
What about the businesses here in Ashland?
Well, personally, they have met our needs, and we enjoy shopping in them. I hope that they find success here. It does seem that the town of Ashland falls into kind of two halves. You've got the historic old town or center part of town with the Iron Horse restaurant and the college on one corner, and other shops and businesses. And then you get to Route 1 and cross it, and then it's geared more for interstate travel with hotels and motels and restaurants, fast food restaurants. I've had friends of ours who've heard we moved to Ashland. They said, "That's where the Cracker Barrel is." I said, "Well, yeah, that's right. There is one there." And just about every other fast food you could think of. But you don't really get a feeling for Ashland just because you stop there and visit some of those places to shop. It's interesting to see the county growing. There are several sections, subdivisions, and more housing developments are planned. And the business corridor that stretches south from the Walmart down towards Sliding Hill, and you can see that there are more businesses being built along through there, and I suppose eventually the road will be completed that will connect like Gander Mountain Sports and the Home Depot with Champion Glass, and then eventually if the Lowe's gets built and the Walmart. So you can see how that's beginning to grow.
Do you think the expansion is a positive thing?
Oh, I think it is, as long as the county is able to establish its own guidelines for growth, to require developers to put in curbs, for example, in storm sewers, to leave ample space for parkland and for churches and schools. And as long as the developers are willing to work with the town in terms of its zoning, its requirements, and as long as the county is able to be consistent in its vision for a balanced rural-urban mix, I think it's a good thing. I think people in general appreciate access to shopping. For example, the Virginia Center Commons, I guess that's still in Henrico County, but it's close enough. You go down Route 1 and then you're there. So you don't really think of it as that far away. But there are a few businesses, they're opening up in the Hanover County side. And to a certain degree, I suppose that's inevitable. But the county seems to be very assertive in its leadership, not to be anti-growth, but to be responsible.
What do you feel about town politics here?
Well, they seem to be fairly participatory. I noticed that there were 3 candidates for the 3 open seats on the town council, so it wasn't really a hot election. But our church was used for a candidates forum, and there are several members of our church that are involved with town commissions and committees. The town is serious about promoting fun and social activities. I guess they call nights on the town, or dances, or just parties, street parties. Those seem to be pretty well attended, and the Strawberry Fair is one of the biggest ones. It seems to be an accessible town government and responsive to community desires. The number of people in my church that are active in various, some political and some non-political, but governmental organizations is pretty impressive.
Okay, for my last question, what do you think makes Ashland so special?
Well, I think part of it is the sense of its history as a community that is host to the college and is a shopping area and residential area that supports the surrounding rural community. That people are welcome to come here and shop here and find whatever they need here handy without having to go all the way into Richmond. And then at the same time, there is a sense of pride in what the town offers to its own residents in terms of celebrations and services. So it's a great combination of a town that's well managed but a very pleasant place to live.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I really feel privileged to live here. That the church provides me a house, and that the house is located in the town of Ashland is a real privilege. And many of my members live right here in the town also, so it's nice to be able to see them on a regular basis and to be a part of a community that cares about its environment and cares about its citizens that have needs for whatever needs there are, and the churches are cooperative with one another, and the town and the campus cooperate with one another also. So it seems like it's a great place to live and really an exciting place to serve as a leader of a congregation alongside all these future leaders here at the campus.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.